Hey everyone, we're back. I'm Jack.
And I'm Alex.
And in today's video, we'll be ranking the bosses of Metronomic's No Straight Roads from worst to best, as per request of our Giga Cytoscriber, Tintinibulations. Thank you for staying with us through thick and thin, and finally, we're delivering on our half of the promise, and we hope you enjoy it. For those of you unaware, we have an active and engaging Patreon community where you can have a direct say in the content we make. We host bi-monthly polls on videos, and starting with our new series coming out soon, you'll also get early access to all of our content before it's released on YouTube. Speaking of, I'm sure many of you have noticed the massive drop in content. There's nothing more we can say than that we apologize, but did it with a reason. We feel that now is the perfect opportunity to unveil our next and biggest project yet. Long-form rankings. By long-form, we mean a collective ranking that takes place over multiple videos, our first set of content being a ranking of every single boss in the Soulsborne series from worst to best. We plan on essentially making this the core of our channel's content from here on out, except for specific videos on new games and miscellaneous topics, and of course, Patreon content as well. Also, I don't know if you'll notice it, but my nose and voice are noticeably out of whack right now, and that's because I'm on Accutane, and it's just a side effect I got, so I apologize. And anyways, once again, as a reminder, the link to our Patreon is in the description. So, without further ado, let's get into the ranking.
Number 7, Sayu. Sayu is something like a Vocaloid fused with a VTuber, operated by a bunch of kids in a control room. Big whoop. We have a VTuber too named Saito-chan. She reads all your comments, and when you type mean ones, she cries, in case you didn't know. Anyways, you have to obliterate her because she likes EDM more than rock, which is a death sentence in the upcoming age of the Bunk Bed Junction Caliphate. To do so, you must navigate a treacherous and lengthy pseudo-platforming segment where your efforts are hindered by attacks from Sayu. Your goal is generally to reach the end of the road, which, contrary to what the title of the game may imply, is often pretty straightforward. There are times when you need to take detours of a sort, though, to get rid of shields protecting stuff you need to whack. I honestly have no idea what a lot of these things are supposed to be. They look like giant DSi game cartridges to me. Common sense indicates that there's something computery or related to VTubing, which is evidently esoteric knowledge not meant for pedestrian normal tubers like myself. For each of these things you bust up, one of the 4 kids running Sayu has their respective technology go haywire, except when it's one of the ones that disables a shield or something, I can't tell them apart. Eventually she decides to have her fans do that glow stick waving thing that only happens in Asian pop concerts and use the power of love and peace to vaporize you with lasers. For what it's worth, Sayu is still far less infuriating than the other ginormous fictional entity that does this. To be completely frank with you guys, I had no idea what the hell was going on in this game about 70% of the time. I just kind of wandered around and hit things until stuff happened. I assure you all that it was an intentional part of the experience though. Bunk Bed Junction is too punk for poser shit like reading tutorials and googling guides and paying attention to dialogue. It worked well enough overall, although playing the game like cave people did ultimately hurt Sayu for a few reasons in our esteem. The fight is one of the longer ones, and it feels more like a level than a boss fight, which is a hit or miss format for me. Instead of having to learn to work around a particular moveset, you just putz around hitting helpless rectangles and playing the drums to activate Sonic the Hedgehog grind rails. I won't lie and pretend this fight roused much emotion out of me, but longtime viewers of our channel should be able to tell from my tone that this is far from one of the most foul displays we've come across.
Number 6, Yinu. Yinu is known as the Golden Maestro of Vinyl City, and for a musical nickname, I guess that's pretty cool. I also don't know any others, so it's hard to compare. The story surrounding this fight is, in summary, that Mayday and Zook invade Yinu's lair and break the piano her now deceased father gave her as a parting gift. Frankly, Alex and I made it to this point in the game at around 2 in the morning, so zoning in on subtle plot details thrown into the dialogue wasn't exactly on the forefront of our minds, so I actually had no idea about this until I read a couple reviews, YouTube comments, and wiki pages. That's pretty fucked up, and you know what? If someone broke my dead dad's piano, I'd probably not be very happy either. Would I turn into a giant red tree thing? I'd say the odds of that are pretty low, but I guess we'll have to wait and find out. The first phase is sort of cool because I guess everything in this game is unique and stuff, but nothing incredibly interesting happens, and that's the main reason why Yinu's so low. This phase lasts about 10 minutes, half the fight, and generally has 0 evolution. The music stays the same in terms of genre, the tempo only gets slightly faster, and it's just a fairly forgettable encounter. I can appreciate the piano, and I think this phase does a good job incorporating it into her moveset, but the tedium of waiting, attacking for that long was only bearable because I did it with Alex. Fighting this boss alone would have driven me mad, like full Mikolash, Cosm-gasms and all. However, in the second phase, there's much more variety musically and gameplay-wise. To an extent, I feel like the main difference was that there was more pink notes, otherwise, honestly, it's not that big of a difference. To be completely upfront, I wasn't as big a fan of this game as so many people online seem to be, but I can appreciate how the game approached stagnant boss design and gave all of them fresh mechanics and multiple unique phase changes. I think phase evolution is an extremely overlooked aspect of modern boss design, and is something that after you play the likes of Elden Ring and Sekiro for example, makes the lack of it in games like Dark Souls stick out immensely. Anyways, as will be the case with pretty much every boss in this video, the final phase is by far the best, not only with regards to visuals, but also the soundtrack. It has a thumping mix of EDM, rock, and classical, and together they combine for a stellar climax. I saw someone online say that, quote, by destroying her piano, we not only broke her dreams of playing to the level she imagined herself at, but also ruined her memories of her past. Essentially, by beating Yinu to get rid of the evil corporation running the city, we left an innocent girl in perpetual limbo. Pretty fucking deep for a rhythm game.
Number 5, 1010. These dudes may be robots, but they're actually based on K-pop boy groups. You can tell based on how they all look the same and make music that sucks. Personal feelings aside, I can personally attest that in Asia, these guys are basically gods. I've been to Korea before and literally every billboard in Seoul has one of these dudes trying to sell you liposuction or skin whitening cream. This effect is only exacerbated in other Asian countries, all of whom other than Japan seem to have collectively agreed that Korea is a nation of divine beings who represent the very concept of beauty itself. With that little bit of background in mind, I'm not at all surprised that the developers of No Straight Roads, who live in Malaysia, thought to parody this subset of the music world in their game about music. The way 1010 work is that they have shields powered by fan support, so most of the time they're all invulnerable. It's a bit like real life now, isn't it? Now I know what you're thinking, but no, you do not actually kill their fans. Instead, you wait for 1010 to attack you, which for whatever reason makes their fans abruptly suspend all support for them until they go back to dancing in place like douchebags. Take advantage of these gaps to beat them up until they break down and need to be replaced by the flying cylinder thing piloted by their leader, a swagged out computer head guy who runs the group like a militia. Let me tell you guys something. I'm not a fan of these types of waiting game bosses where you spend time just sitting around jerking off until the AI descends to throw you a bone and make itself vulnerable. But, with that said, the second half of this fight is a lot better. Once the cylinder touches down, the fight becomes a lot more conventional, with you dodging his attacks and fighting back with music notes in a manner not too dissimilar from how you use the stars in Kirby games. The moves are telegraphed here more than anywhere else in the game possibly, with the actions he takes being determined by the slot machine on his chest. I have a lot of respect for this guy. He's a battle-hardened veteran with an appreciation for the finer things in life, like gambling and giving teenagers eating disorders. It's a terrible shame that Zeke and Mayday fucking hate the troops and leave him to ramble to an audience of none. Kids these days, no respect.
Number 4, DJ Subatomic Supernova. The first boss made a damning impression on the both of us, and I'd say was probably the most memorable from sheer scale and ridiculousness, and if I had to do a my favorite moments ranking, he'd be second only behind DK West, who show up very shortly and left us crying on the floor in tears from laughter. Here's a picture I took of myself right before I left for the bathroom to almost vomit from laughing so hard. So yeah, anyways, DJ Subatomic Supernova isn't as comedically pleasing or whatever, but to actually get into the fight, I'll start by saying that Space Daft Punk in a virtual Mysterio world is a cooler visual concept than anything I could ever come up with infinite time. If he was a Fortnite skin, I'd buy it. If he was a Halloween costume, I'd wear it. If he was an NFT, I'd convince all you guys to pump money into it and successfully scam the masses with my very own Logan Paul pump and dump scheme. Essentially, DJ Subatomic Supernova looks sick AF, and his arena too. And his voice, I forgot about that, it's all great. I also like his theme a lot, to be honest, way more than any other boss in this game. House music is probably my favorite genre currently, and while I never really pay attention to in-game music in general, DJ Subatomic Supernova Supernova was cookin'. Check out my house playlist, which I'll make sure to link in the description. As well, the fight works in a really cool way. You're fighting him on a vinyl disc and everything flows in the same direction. The way it integrates the flow of the music into the movement was genuinely epic and keeps you very engaged. Like any non-RPG, it also helps that this is the first major fight of the game and the novelty of it that comes with being the appetizer, but the point stands that there were little to no creative safety measures taken here, giving this fight a sincere level of indelible charm we both appreciate greatly.
Number 3, DK West. Oh boy, this guy may not be number 1, but he is by far and away the star of this video if we had to pick one. Jack mentioned it earlier, but this fight had us rolling on the floor, dying of laughter virtually the entire time. Zeke's brother is not a member of NSR, probably for a number of reasons, not the least of which being the fact that he is, for all intents and purposes, one of the worst diss artists in the history of mankind. Listening to this guy try to diss Zook took us back to middle school, when we knew this one guy who would cook up nothing but incomprehensible garbage-ass bars every day at lunch. You really had to be there. The general flow was something like, Zook, you big fat cuke, I'm the best, that's why they call me West, yeah, or something like that. To survive his killer flow, you need to dodge a bunch of red things, which should pose no problem at all unless the blood pouring out of your ears from listening to him does something funky to your balance center. Once you get up in his grill, you need to hit his hands a bunch until his admittedly cool-looking shadow collapses into a clump and lowers its guard. While I've made no secret of the low esteem I hold his lyricism in, I'll concede that making a diss rap in a game for kids is a Herculean task that few would ever bother to attempt, so I'm not saying it's easy, I couldn't do it. We can't all be the Drillbot from Skylanders Giants, I fear. The best ones in real life are just a tasteful balance of overt death threats and calling the other guy a fruitcake, which is at the very least a T rating. The gameplay here is brain dead enough to pass as a Cocomelon baby stem visualizer, but the comedy, intended or not, elevate this to a top 3 placement.
Number 2, Eve. Fighting Eve felt like I was taking part in an episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I'd say the average JoJo's episode has a mix of extremely confusing visuals, unclear abilities, clunky dialogue, and, well, I'll say ostentatious character design. I feel like this thing could have been a Mario level with the whole contrasting design thing. Honestly, whether or not you play alone or with someone else is pretty irrelevant in this game outside of having more fun from just hanging out, but what makes this fight so noticeable is that it actually separates Zook and Mayday, making 2 players genuinely matter. No other fight really emphasizes the dual character system at all, especially not to the extent that Eve does, and it makes it a lot more fun and memorable. Phase 2 is where they get split up, but not to skip ahead, Phase 1 is a decently fun time. Her whole gimmick is that she has a red side and a white side, and she spawns a bunch of random hands and shit throughout both of them. Eve will send out groups of these little mini hands that after a while will die off, followed by her spawning in. Like all the other bosses, during this down period you batter her until she teleports backwards like Gwendolyn, and you repeat the process. Phase 2 is essentially the same idea, but you need to complete the segment on your own. It was surprisingly jarring having to be completely independent because I felt like with a partner it was very easy to get lost in the fact that there were 2 of us and I didn't need to focus as much on taking damage etc. because I could just fall back and let Alex tank for me if I needed it or whatever. Anyways, the third phase is where shit goes absolutely bananas and I genuinely had no idea what was going on, if the gameplay isn't already evident of that. I do feel like a lot of these bosses are primitive if you take away the grand spectacle, but Eve was in my opinion the most complex fight in the game and was one of the few that we both struggled to beat. Also, the ending was solid and the story of this fight was equally good. Eve, for what she is a good boss and was very fun to fight. Bravo.
Number 1, Tatiana. Tatiana is fairly polite as big bad bosses go, electing to begin the encounter with an educational lecture on the merits of democratically instituted fascism. I'd make fun of her, but honestly, that's probably what I would do if I was calling the shots also, so who am I to judge? In a perfect Cytocracy, your caste is determined by your viewing hours of Cytonox content, and non-subscribers are all laborers and sanitation workers. The day will come when this is how things work, so make sure to log your hours before things get crazy. Anyways, this fight made me think of the Clock Tower boss from Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon thanks to the arena design, but thankfully it's an actual boss and not just an enemy gauntlet. It's also got these cool, almost church-like icons of the NSR artists in the background, although they are quickly shattered in favor of a view of the city below. Things start off by making you hit a ball of light, because why not, and after enough of this, Tatiana jumps down to behead you with a sword or something. She is quick to demonstrate her ability to use it, and is definitely a nice feeling when you realize you're in a legit fight, and it's not like with Eve, who, like her as I do, you have no idea what the fuck's going on half the time. The difficulty is a good level for a final boss, claiming Jack and I's lives at least once before we manage to scrape through to victory. Things heat up literally about halfway through when she decides to ditch the Miss Simeon from Amazing World of Gumball look in favor of self-immolating like that Vietnamese monk. This turns out to be a smart move because instead of killing her, it makes her able to teleport and shoot fireballs. Sounds like setting yourself on fire is 50-50, maybe I should give that a whirl. This is the closest the game ever gets to a smooth-feeling God of War 3-esque combat experience, and while some innate clunkiness makes it not quite perfect, it's still a commendable effort and the best boss in the game the way we see it. Add No Straight Roads to the Hall of Fame list of games where the final boss is actually good.
Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, subscribe, and join our Patreon if you'd like, and finally, once again, be on the lookout for constant new uploads. Links are in the description for all our socials, and thank you once again for sticking all the way through. That's all for now. Deuces.